There are three main migration paths across the Mediterranean Sea, from Africa to Europe. The Western Mediterranean route to Spain, the Central Mediterranean route to Malta and Italy, and the Eastern Mediterranean route to Greece. The Western route is mainly used by migrants from Mali, the Gambia, and Senegal. The Central route sees migrants from Nigeria, Ghana, and Niger. And the Eastern route is chosen by those from Somalia, Eritrea, and Darfur in South Sudan, passing through Sudan and Egypt to the North African coast. Most of these routes lead to Libya, which has become the primary launching point for the sea journey to Italy, the major gateway to Europe for these migrants and refugees. The Central Mediterranean route has become a key path for migrants and asylum seekers trying to enter Europe irregularly, aiming for Italy and Malta. Information about this route spreads through communities, previous travelers, and social media, helping others to follow. The journey is perilous, with many risking their lives on dangerous sea voyages from North Africa, particularly through Libya. Europe's strict immigration policies have inadvertently fueled smuggling and trafficking networks in Libya, with a significant blurring of the lines between smuggling, that is, helping someone enter a country illegally for profit, and trafficking, that is, exploiting someone for profit. Niger has emerged as a crucial transit country for migrants heading to Libya and ultimately Europe. Despite legal challenges and efforts by Niger to control migrant trafficking, the flow of migrants through Niger to Libya remains significant. Migrants often pause in Niger to work and save money for the next leg of their journey, which can take several months. The enforcement of anti-trafficking laws in Niger has pushed smugglers to use less visible routes, increasing the dangers of the journey. Migrants face extreme conditions in the Sahara Desert, with the risks of dehydration, starvation, and abandonment by smugglers. The city of Agadez in Niger, a historic crossroads, has become a major hub for migrants heading to Europe. Despite the risks, including high mortality rates in the desert, the local economy of Agadez heavily depends on migration flows, transforming the city into a crucial but controversial part of the migration route to Europe. The journey to Europe is expensive, costing several $1,000s, and can take years, with many migrants stopping to work and save up for the next part of their trip. For a lot of migrants who end up in Italy, their journey started in the Horn of Africa, countries like Eritrea, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Sudan. Other West African nations, like Nigeria, Mali, Ghana, and the Gambia. These migrants, often a mix of refugees and those seeking better economic opportunities, typically use the same smugglers to navigate these routes to their European destinations. Recent research suggests that around 80% of these journeys are assisted by smugglers and criminal groups, offering services like transport, fake IDs, bribing officials, and helping with settlement. Smugglers in countries along the way work with smuggling contractors in the migrants' home countries to guide them across the Sahara to the coast. While some smuggling networks are organized crime groups, many consist of loosely connected individuals, making it hard for authorities to track them. The late Colonel Muammar Gaddafi recognized the importance of addressing past injustices, leveraging his influence and Libya's resources to foster reconciliation and empowerment across Africa and the Arab world. He notably became the first Arab leader to extend a formal apology for the Arab slave trade and its contributions to European slavery on behalf of the Arab peoples to Africans. Gaddafi invested significantly in the African Union and directed Libya's wealth towards bolstering the African continent, advocating for Pan-African unity. His efforts aimed at mending African-Arab relations and promoting collective empowerment are reminiscent of the solidarity seen during the era of leaders like Egypt's Jamal Abdel Nasser and Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah within the non-aligned movement. His collaboration with Hugo Chavez to mediate the Libyan crisis highlighted him as a significant figure in anti-imperialist circles. Following the downfall of these leaders, the repercussions include the targeting of so-called black Africans in Libya, the cessation of NATO's professed concerns over violence in the country, and the descent of Libya into chaos and conflict, setting the stage for external exploitation. The term black, as conceptualized by Owen Alec Shahada, transcends racial and ethnic boundaries, symbolizing a collective identity formed in the aftermath of colonialism and slavery, embodying resistance, resilience, and cultural revival. This redefined notion of black echoes through various struggles for justice, embodying a universal resistance against oppression and a testament to the enduring spirit of communities striving for liberation and dignity. After the fall of Gaddafi's government in Libya in 2011, the country plunged into chaos, leading to civil war and a lack of central authority. This turmoil made Libya a dangerous route for migrants from West Africa trying to reach Europe via the Mediterranean Sea. The absence of government control allowed the terrorist group ISIS to establish a presence in Libya, and criminal networks involved in human trafficking and the slave trade flourished without restraint. Migrants and refugees in Libya face severe hardships. They are often robbed or extorted for more money than initially agreed upon by smugglers. The reliance on smugglers is partly due to the numerous checkpoints within the country. Some migrants end up in debt to these smugglers, under pay-as-you-go arrangements, making them susceptible to abuse and forced labor. Children are particularly vulnerable, sometimes forced into begging or theft. In southern Libya, migrants, including men, women, and children, are controlled by smuggling groups, often without being physically detained. They are subjected to forced labor in various sectors such as farming, domestic work, construction, and waste collection, frequently without pay. Women may be forced into prostitution. Due to their irregular status, migrants have limited access to services, face economic barriers, and suffer from widespread discrimination. Challenges include high housing costs, security issues, overcrowded shelters, and limited healthcare access, exacerbated by a lack of medical supplies and staff, discriminatory treatment, and high costs. A disturbing aspect of this crisis is the emergence of a slave market along migrant routes into Libya, where migrants are sold and bought openly, with some involvement of Libyans and nationals from Ghana and Nigeria. This situation has led to migrants being treated as commodities, captured, sold, traded, and exploited by militias loyal to the UN-backed government in Libya. They are held in overcrowded prisons and sold in markets that have been likened to slave auctions. International outrage ensued after video footage showing the abuse of migrants, including acts akin to slavery, emerged in 2017. The UN Security Council condemned these acts as severe human rights abuses, potentially constituting crimes against humanity, and called for immediate investigations to hold those responsible accountable. Following the global condemnation, the United Nations imposed sanctions in 2018 against individuals, including Libyans and Eritreans, who played leading roles in these human trafficking networks. The significant migration of Africans to Europe and other regions has become a prominent topic in news outlets across Europe, North America, and beyond. Social media platforms were flooded with distressing reports of Africans, many of whom lost their lives in the Sahara Desert and on perilous sea journeys. During the peak of this migration crisis, several European countries tightened their borders, making it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for migrants to enter, while a portion of their populations viewed African migrants and refugees negatively, likening them to unwanted intrusions. For many years, people from Africa have embarked on dangerous journeys across the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea, aiming for better lives in Europe. Along the way, they face terrifying risks. Some are captured and held as modern-day slaves or in detention camps like those in Libya, while others lose their lives in the desert or drown in the sea. The journey is not only physically difficult, but can also leave deep psychological scars, leading to conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, among migrants and refugees. The current migrant crisis is deeply rooted in Africa's colonial past and its ongoing complicated relationships with the rest of the world, including the effects of neo-colonialism. The news often shows deeply moving scenes of Africans packed into small, unsafe boats, or the sad aftermath of those who didn't survive the journey from North Africa to southern Europe. The Mediterranean Sea, rich in history and a crossroads for many cultures, stretches thousands of miles and is dotted with several islands. It has always been a path for exploration, trade, and migration, shaping human history for over 3,000 years. Now, Africans fleeing hardship are taking to these waters, trying to reach new lives in Europe. They face modern challenges as countries use advanced methods to control migration. People move for many reasons. While we often hear that Africans move because of poverty or fleeing violence, the truth is more complex. Research shows that migration from Africa includes people from various parts of the continent, many from countries that are not the poorest. Economic growth in some African countries has enabled people to seek better opportunities, both within Africa and beyond, especially in Europe. However, those risking their lives on dangerous sea journeys are often driven by desperation rather than just the pursuit of better opportunities. Conflicts, terrorism, political repression, and the long-term impacts of climate change, such as droughts and resource scarcity, have forced many to flee their homes. The situation in the Mediterranean is part of a more significant crisis, involving complex politics of border control and migration management by European countries. Italy, with its long coastline and historical ties to Libya, plays a central role in the crisis. Past agreements between Italy and Libya have focused on controlling migration through naval patrols and controversial measures like direct repatriation, without refugee status assessments. Due to tough immigration rules and the urgent need to flee their situations, many migrants and refugees from the so-called Sub-Saharan Africa region resort to paying smugglers to help them cross the Sahara Desert towards Libya and Tunisia, aiming to reach Europe by sea. Libya's struggle to combat smuggling has led officials to focus primarily on controlling migration flows. Migrants caught after being rescued at sea, stopped at checkpoints, or found during raids are detained. Although they are supposed to be taken to court, they often remain in detention for months without a court order, until they are released, deported, or choose to return to their home countries. This situation has turned detention into a significant humanitarian issue in Libya, with facilities and officials overwhelmed and migrants living in poor conditions or being moved from one center to another. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, reports that in 2018, Libyan maritime authorities intercepted around 14,000 individuals trying to cross the sea, with over half of these people sent back to Libya and placed in detention centers. These centers, overseen by the Department for Combating Irregular Migration, DCIM, and nominally under the Ministry of the Interior, are often actually controlled by armed groups outside government oversight. Detention facilities in Libya are known for being overcrowded, lacking in resources, and not providing detainees access to legal representation or judicial review. As of November 2018, nearly 6,000 foreigners, mostly from Africa, were detained across the country. Reports of human rights abuses in these centers are common, including torture, rape, and extortion. Migrants describe beatings, theft, and other forms of abuse by guards, as well as exposure to diseases due to unsanitary conditions. Women and children, detained in places like Al Jawiya prison in Misrata, face similar conditions under the supervision of male guards, making them particularly vulnerable to sexual violence. There are first-hand accounts of African migrants losing their lives during detention. Some are starved, beaten to death, or, in some instances, shot. However, sexual abuse in Libyan detention does not only affect women. Male migrants in Italy have also reported sexual violence during their time in Libya, with rape sometimes used as a form of punishment. Some have experienced rape in private settings, while others have been assaulted in front of fellow detainees. Reports suggest that male victims of sexual abuse in Libya are likely underreported due to cultural stigma. Traffickers have also been known to force migrants to assault each other, using the footage as blackmail. This highlights the severe and widespread nature of abuse within Libyan detention centers, affecting men and women alike. The perpetuation of anti-black sentiment among Arabs is, in part, driven by an emulation of the attributes celebrated by past and present colonizers. There's a widespread inclination towards ideals of beauty and success, characterized by lighter skin, straight hair, slender noses, and slim figures, leading to a devaluation of darker skin, curly hair, diverse nose shapes, and fuller bodies. These characteristics are unjustly associated with inferiority and poverty. Black Africans face racial discrimination and derogatory treatment, not only in the Western world, but also in certain regions of Africa, particularly in North Africa, where Afro-Arabs reside. Instances of such discrimination include an incident at the United Nations Environmental Assembly in Nairobi, Kenya, where an Egyptian official allegedly referred to sub-Saharan Africans as dogs and slaves, sparking outrage and formal complaints. This episode highlights a broader issue of racism within some Afro-Arab communities, despite official denials from governments such as Egypt's. The problem of racial prejudice extends beyond verbal abuse. It encompasses historical and ongoing injustices like slavery and ethnic cleansing in countries like Mauritania, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, and others. In Mauritania, despite slavery being officially abolished in 1981, a significant portion of the dark-skinned population remains enslaved. Sudan has seen ethnic cleansing and conflict, notably in Darfur, leading to the creation of South Sudan. Libya and Algeria have also witnessed violent racism against black Africans, including massacres and public attacks. These patterns of discrimination and violence reflect deep-seated issues of identity and superiority complexes that persist. The kafala system is a sponsorship system that governs the relationship between foreign workers and their employers in many countries in the Arab world, particularly in the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as in Lebanon and Jordan. Under this system, a foreign worker's immigration status is legally bound to an individual employer or sponsor, known as a kafil, during the contract period. The worker cannot enter the country, transfer employment, or leave the country without the consent of their kafil. The main features of the kafala system include sponsorship. Foreign workers must have a local sponsor to work and reside in the host country. This sponsor is usually their employer. Limited mobility. Workers are often unable to change jobs or leave the country without the permission of their current employer. In many cases, the employer holds the worker's passport to ensure control. Dependency. The system creates a dependency on the employer for the worker's legal and immigration status in the country, leading to potential abuses of power. The kafala employment system in the Arab world is often a conduit for severe racism and exploitation, particularly affecting domestic workers from Africa and Asia, including countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Workers under this system face a range of abuses, including physical, psychological, and sexual harm, with little opportunity for recourse. Many are confined to their employers' homes, deprived of their personal documents, and, as in the case of an Ethiopian housekeeper named Hawa, may endure such severe violence that their lives are endangered. Hawa's experience highlights the grim reality of many domestic workers, unpaid for extensive periods, subjected to brutal treatment, and ultimately abandoned without resources. The kafala system, which is widespread across the Gulf countries and was prevalent in Syria, treats foreign domestic workers as subhuman, stripping them of their dignity, rights, and dreams. The widespread racism within this system not only degrades the workers, but also ignores their humanity and aspirations, with victims often feeling powerless and unseen in their struggle for justice. In North Africa and the Middle East, the descendants of former slaves continue to face the impacts of slavery's legacy on their social, intimate, and political lives. Despite formal freedom, the racial and color-based discrimination rooted in slavery's history remains a significant issue. A culture of silence has long hindered discussions on race and slavery in these regions. But recent attention to discrimination against so-called sub-Saharan Africans and their descendants has started to change the narrative. This video is part of a broader debate on racism's ties to slavery, particularly in areas like Mauritania, where descent-based discrimination has been challenged for decades. These efforts reflect a growing awareness of the need to confront and understand the deep-rooted issues of race and discrimination that continue to affect the lives of many in these regions. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Until the lions have their own historians, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.